Hello, and welcome to the Community IT Innovators Technology Topics Podcast, where we discuss nonprofit technology, cybersecurity, tech project implementation, strategic planning, and nonprofit IT careers. Find us at communityit.com. Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed.
Welcome, everyone, to the Community IT Innovators webinar, Nonprofit IT Expert Roundtable. This is always one of our most popular webinars every year. We have a panel of our senior staff here today to talk about essential trends in nonprofit tech and what that means for nonprofits. They're going to talk about office IT management, cybersecurity, and cloud computing. My name is Carolyn Woodard. I'm the Outreach Director for Community IT, and I'm the moderator today. I'm very happy to hear from our experts. Johan, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you, Carolyn. Very happy to be here this afternoon, and my thanks to everyone who's joining us. My name is Johan Hammerstrom. I'm the CEO at Community IT. I've been here for over 20 years and have enjoyed working with nonprofit organizations and helping them use technology. And one of the exciting things about technology is that it's always changing. And I'm really looking forward to today's discussion to talk about some of the trends that we're anticipating in the coming year.
Great. It's nice to join with everyone here today. My name is Matthew Eshelman, and I'm the Chief Technology Officer at Community IT. I'm actually coming up on my 21st anniversary as being an employee owner here at Community IT, and enjoying the range of organizations that I get to interact with, and the insight that I gain from getting to work with so many different organizations. And some of that I think will get reflected back as we talk a little bit about the cybersecurity trends that we saw last year and what we anticipate coming into 2023.
And I'm Steve Longenecker. I'm the Director of IT Consulting at Community IT. I'm the rookie of the crowd. I've been here for only 18 years. I love this annual webinar. I enjoy arguing with Johan and Matt anyway, so we might as well do it for our audience's benefit. It's a pleasure to be with you today.
Before we begin, if you're not familiar with Community IT, a little bit about us. We are a 100% employee-owned managed services provider, and we provide outsourced IT support. We work exclusively with nonprofit organizations, and our mission is to help nonprofits accomplish their missions through the effective use of technology. We are big fans of what well-managed IT can do for your nonprofit. We serve nonprofits across the United States. We've been doing this for over 20 years, and we are technology experts. We are consistently given the MSP 501 recognition for being a top MSP. All right, so we have some learning objectives for today. We are going to hope by the end of the webinar today, you will have some understanding around essential IT trends for nonprofit management in terms of office trends, cybersecurity, and technology. So we're going to look at these trends through these three lenses with the different experts in those areas leading those conversations for 10 to 15 minutes slots. This today is part one of our Tech Trends panel discussion, focusing on essential trends that every office and every nonprofit needs to be doing now and planning for doing for the next 3 to 5 years as part of well-managed IT. In February, we are going to have part two with a panel of experts addressing more forward-looking trends and opportunities that tech-savvy nonprofits will want to be pursuing and investing in. I want to remind everyone that Community IT is vendor agnostic, and this presentation is to discuss how nonprofits are using technology tools. We will only make specific recommendations for our clients based on their specific business needs. So we're going to start out, as we often do, with a poll. So what size is your nonprofit? We know that different sizes have different IT needs and maybe are looking at these trends that we're going to be talking about today in kind of a different lens. So the options are from 1 to 10 size nonprofit, from 11 to 25, from 26 to 100, 101 plus, or it just doesn't apply. You're not part of a nonprofit that is that size. So I'll give people another moment or two to answer. All right, and I'm going to go ahead and share the results. Johan, would you like to share with the audience the results?
Yeah, thank you everyone for inputting your response into the poll. We have 4% of our attendees, that's one attendee who's in the 1 to 10 range, about 20% in the 11 to 25 range. Most of the attendees, about 2/3, are in the 26 to 100 range, but we do have another 20% of the attendees in the over 100 range. So it's a pretty nice mix of organizational sizes represented on the webinar today.
Thank you. And I think that, there's different, like you have different sizes, different levels of maturity. Maybe you're a startup and you're growing quickly. Maybe you grew really quickly, so you grew to a large size, but you still kind of have a startup mentality. Maybe you're at an older organization that's been kind of mid-sized and doing what you do for, decades, perhaps. So there's different technology needs at those different levels. But for sure, thank you so much for sharing that with us. All right, so our next poll, we're going to jump right into a second one. And Johan is going to read through the options that we have here for how complex your IT needs are at your organization.
Yeah, thank you. So how integral is IT to your mission and your business needs? How important or central is IT specifically to the work that your organization does? Do you use IT for basic office needs to communicate and maybe send out reports? But are all of your business tools online that you can manage yourselves? So that's category number one. Category number two is, in addition to that, you also have some business critical platforms that you need IT experts to support for you, like a CRM, a database, more advanced financial tools, things that are beyond sort of what you can support yourselves without dedicated IT staff or support. Three, are you using IT directly to deliver services? So they're not just supporting the work that you're doing, but they're central to your programmatic work. So that could be, for example, a charter school that is using IT education, ed tech to deliver education to its students, a healthcare provider that maybe is using iPads out in the field for the work that they're doing. So that's category number three. Number four, finally, you were founded by disruptors and you use IT in innovative ways. Maybe you've got your own development team in-house. You're building your own applications. We've definitely seen a lot more of that in the last 5 to 10 years. Nonprofits that are basically creating IT as part of accomplishing their mission. So that's category number four. And if none of these apply to you, you can respond category number five.
So we had a fairly similar bell curve, I think. So we had one respondent who is really just using IT for basic office support, about 60% with the basic office support plus category, another 27% delivering services using IT, and one using IT in innovative ways, and another two that it was not applicable. Thank you so much for sharing that with us. And that helps us also, frame how we're going to talk about these different trends. So what we wanted to do was take 10 to 15 minutes on each of these topics. So you see a kind of busy slide right now with 3 columns on office management, cybersecurity, and cloud computing. So I feel like in our when we were preparing for this webinar, we talked a little bit among the panelists about that we've kind of reached an inflection point. So our initial impressions when we talked about this was that maybe the future is not as unpredictable now as it was a couple of years ago. We're out of the uncertainty phase. We're out of this kind of churn phase of like needing tools to handle rapid change and maybe choosing them very quickly to deploy them.
So today we're going to talk a little bit more about office management IT. Some of the trends that you see on the slide, for example, we're in remote offices or hybrid offices, and that trend is here to stay with the nonprofit sector. We also see a lot of remote outsourced IT. So it used to be that your MSP or service provider had to be local, and we ourselves worked very locally in Washington, D.C. in that area. But with new tools and new ways of deploying equipment and software, it really is possible to have a completely remote IT support. Working from home changed things. We think that the user experience has become key, and tools that do not have a good user experience are not going to be successful. People are moving away from them. Change management is definitely needed, pretty much at all levels, whether you have implemented something that isn't working or if you're about to make a new tool. So again, when we think about going back to quick decisions that we made in 2020, maybe now you need to look back and kind of reapply some change management principles to those tools and maybe the training for your staff and communication particularly. And I think Johan's going to talk a little bit more about IT governance. So having made some of these decisions quickly, now is the time to be more intentional about making sure your policies match the way your users and your office are using the technology now.
Yeah, I mean, I think, as we were thinking about trends, what we're seeing with the organizations that we support and what we actually are, to be honest, like seeing with ourselves as a business is, a shift that we're kind of in the, I hate to say it, but I feel like we're in the post-pandemic stage now. I know Matt and I were talking once, and he's like, yeah, he's got some good epidemiologist friends, and they were telling him the pandemic's over when everyone decides it's over. Like there's no sort of epidemiological definition of the end of a pandemic. It's sort of like we all kind of decide, okay, we're getting back to normal life. And what I mean by that, and when the impact that has on the work that we do, is that for 2020, 2021 certainly, and for a good part of last year, we were still very much responding to a very fluid, dynamic, and unpredictable world. So when the pandemic began in 2020, we all had to make a lot of changes very quickly on how we were going to be working, as organizations. And there was the big shift to working remotely. And then there was a lot of uncertainty around how long that pandemic would last and how long organizations would need to work remotely. And so a lot of decisions had to get made very quickly. A lot of technology had to get deployed in a pretty rapid time frame just for organizations to continue surviving, and doing the work that they're going to do. And as best we can tell, and certainly it's been the case for us and for a lot of organizations that we work with, there's now a sense that, I kind of feel like I know what 2023 is going to be like in 2024 and 2025 for my organization in terms of how we're working. Are we going to be fully remote? Are we going to be hybrid? Are we going to be going back to the office? There's a lot more clarity around what that might look like over the next, 2 to 3 years. And because of that clarity, there's a greater sense that we can plan ahead a little bit more. And a lot of the decisions that were made in kind of a rushed fashion over the last 2 or 3 years around technology can be replaced with more deliberate decision making processes. So that's not an exciting trend in the sense that it's not as exciting as some of the crazy technologies that we're seeing emerging, recently. But I think getting back to a place where technology planning and technology management and decision making is a little more considered and done with a little bit longer time frame is something that we're strongly recommending and something that we see as a trend that organizations really need the stability that comes from that longer term planning and more deliberate decision making process. I see you came off mute, Steve. I didn't want to just keep talking if you wanted to add something there.
Well, yeah, obviously we discussed this ahead of time, and that is kind of what we were feeling, that is a significant trend, and particularly in contrast to how things have felt during the pandemic. Not that, again, the line between the pandemic being something that we're living with and something that we look at in the rearview mirror is not going to be a bright line, and I'm sure many of us feel like we're still living with it for sure. But yeah, we are definitely seeing clients doing more budgeting and planning. I think it's also interesting that some of the things that the pandemic changed, like to say things are getting normal again, is true in the sense that we are feeling a sense of normalcy, but it's not the same normal that preceded the pandemic. There may be some things that have returned. I know that some of our clients, particularly the larger ones, are very interested in having people be back in the office. Maybe not full time like they were before the pandemic, but at least part time. But frankly, some of our smaller clients that have found that found during the pandemic that they could do their service to accomplish their missions without being in the office. It's very freeing to work remotely. Employees certainly appreciate not having to do a daily commute, but also, there's an opportunity to save on office costs, and some of the things that maintaining an office requires, both in terms of IT and in terms of not just IT. So it's not like we've gone back to the way things were before the pandemic. Some things have changed forever. Another thing that comes to mind is the use of virtual meeting tools, whether that's Zoom or Microsoft Teams or what have you. All those funny videos that were trending in early 2020 of lawyers who couldn't figure out how to make themselves stop looking like sea slugs on their Zoom meeting or whatever. Like we've gotten through that, right? Now everybody knows how to run a Zoom meeting. Everyone knows how to, even my mother-in-law, bless her heart, can get on the family Zoom meeting, with and have her sound work, which wasn't the case when the pandemic started. It's like some of that stuff's just been burned into all of us. So it's different. But at the same time, it doesn't feel like the floor is constantly being pulled out from under us, which I think it did feel like for quite a while there. Like it just didn't seem like it would stop. You thought, oh, we'll be back in the office in 6 months, and then a new wave would hit, and it, and there just wasn't. It didn't feel like you could plan. And now I think we're back to the fact that no, you can, and we will. We need to be mature again about this.
Yeah, I think the pandemic really accelerated a lot of trends that were already underway, like the virtual meeting trend. There was a saying that the end point is the perimeter, meaning all of your computing, world and your data is now not behind a firewall at your office, but sort of out there in the world, and you have to figure out how to protect all of your data and your information and provide security in sort of a remote and dispersed way. So those trends were already kind of starting to happen, 2015, 2016, but the pandemic really made it so that is the new normal. And there is no going back to a world with servers and a world with firewall. There's no going back to a world where nonprofit staff aren't expected to provide some level of their own IT support, which is what happened when people had to work from home. And also were able to kind of define their own user experience in many ways. So I think in some ways, the pandemic also empowered nonprofit staff to take more ownership and control over their use of IT and their IT experience. And I think that's something that IT departments, if you will, IT teams at nonprofits need to be mindful of and take into consideration as they're planning new initiatives. Like it's the dynamic between the IT department and the rest of the organization has changed because of the sort of intense reliance on IT and dependence on individuals to support their own IT by working at home and over the course of the pandemic.
It's gone both ways too. I mean, because that users had to step up, but also IT departments had to step up. There's a lot more tools available now, or maybe again, it's to your point, Johan, the tools were available before, but the tools are now in use. We had so many of our clients start using those that were using Windows, and there's a Mac equivalent, but the autopilot Intune and having laptops shipped directly to the end user, and the end user unboxes the laptop, turns it on, and like it right away like talks to the cloud, picks up its policies, and starts basically installing all the software and everything that's needed. Like those tools existed pre-pandemic, but they weren't that important for us to really, I mean, we explored them, we played with them, but it didn't seem like a value to our clients to really push them because everybody went to the office every day. So why not ship the laptop to the office and have an IT person unpack it and set it up and give it to the end user? Like that seemed like pretty reasonable way to do things. And it was reasonable when everybody went to the office every day. But the pandemic changed that. And so end users needed to be comfortable doing their part, but IT departments also have changed. And that fits in with the second bullet point that we made, that, Community IT's business has changed. Not that you guys are tuning in to this webinar to hear about our business, but our business has changed in that we really are able to deliver services nationally now. And we ourselves turn down business if people made inquiries from too far away from Washington, D.C., where our home office is and was, I guess, because we felt like it was important for us to have the ability to put people, onto the keyboards themselves, the boots on the ground, or whatever the expression is, for us to deliver good service. And that just wasn't possible, even for our customers that were in Washington, D.C., because their problems were at home, and they didn't want us showing up at their house anyway, because they didn't want us bringing COVID into their house. So we had to do things remotely. And if we're doing things remotely for people in Washington, D.C., we might as well do things remotely for people all over the country. And our staff now are all over the country. It's amazing how it's changed. And I don't know whether I feel like we've seen that change. We are definitely taking on clients now that don't have an office. That's becoming much more common. So it's changed things.
Yeah. I mean, I think one of the things that we learned in the pandemic is what can be done remotely and virtually and what can't be. And I think, for example, teaching, like public education is something that can't be done remotely. All the studies that have come out over the experience of virtual learning have been pretty conclusive, that trying to teach children in a virtual way does not work very well, and they need to be in the building. I think on the flip side, what we've learned is that you can actually do IT support and you can deploy IT solutions pretty effectively in a remote way. And I think that's something that as organizations look to 2023 and the next 3 to 4 years can kind of count on that. Like it's this whole remote working. Now it's going to vary. Certain organizations have to be on site, like they have to have offices. And I think one of the trends that we've seen is that larger organizations also tend to be returning to the office, and returning to hybrid work environments more than smaller organizations. So being able to work remotely is not a one size fits all solution. Being able to deliver IT solutions effectively to remote and dispersed staff has been very effective. And I think that's a trend that will continue.
Has that changed like governance needs and maybe policy needs for nonprofit organizations after going through this huge change, maybe of having more people working more remotely? Have you seen that clients need to kind of up their understanding of their policies or change their policies?
Well, I think it gets to the fact that we're all moving so quickly to just keep the wheels turning on our organizations and our businesses. We had to move quickly and didn't have time to stop and write a big employee handbook or a big policy document. But I think we're all now like looking at all these new systems and environments that employees are working in and realizing we need to like play some catch up with the policies. Like the employee handbook maybe hasn't been looked at. The IT acceptable use policy maybe hasn't been updated in 3 or 4 years. And there was a time where, you could probably wait 3 or 4 years to update your acceptable use policy. But obviously, like if you haven't updated it in the last 6 months, it's probably really out of date. And so we're entering an interesting time where the most important things in IT right now are probably the least exciting or the least interesting, right? We all want to talk about AI, but you probably should be rewriting your IT policies.
Governance, yeah.
Thank you for joining Community IT for this podcast, Part 1. Subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits. Listen for Part 2 in your podcast feed. Community IT does these free webinars and podcasts for our community, and we love sharing our knowledge and experience. If you have more questions or are having trouble with your IT at your nonprofit, please get in touch with us on our website, www.communityit.com, so we can start a conversation or schedule an assessment. Downloading any of our free resources there will get you signed up for our webinar reminders, and you can attend our next webinar in real time and ask our experts your own questions. If you love podcasts, please subscribe and leave us a rating to help others find this leadership resource for nonprofits.